Welcome back. We now present this special feature.
Love him or hate him, it's unquestionable that the presidency of Donald Trump is unprecedented in about every possible way. Of all the many ways he stood out from previous presidents, his security is among the most eye-opening. The money being thrown around to protect himself, his family, and his assets is mind-boggling no matter what side of the political fence you're on. Check out these 10 crazy facts about President Trump's security and see for yourself. Obviously, every president will receive top-notch security, and that means shelling out the big bucks. Protecting President Obama and his family, for example, cost on average around $16 million per year, according to the conservative think tank Judicial Watch. President Trump, meanwhile, quickly made that amount look like mere pocket change. After the first 100 days of the Trump presidency, reports of his security costs became public, and the figures were astounding. According to the LA Times, protecting the president and his family cost an unreal $29.4 million. While Trump certainly has a bigger family to protect than Obama, that doesn't completely explain how in just 14 weeks his security cost nearly doubled what his predecessors cost in a year. Sensing that these kinds of costs would continue, in May 2017, Congress budgeted a whopping $120 million to protect Trump and his family for a year. That's just a few million bucks shy of what it cost to protect Obama for all 8 years of his term. So if it's not just a family thing, what else explains the extravagant costs? For one thing, Trump and his family take far more international flights than previous presidents did. Plus, the president's controversial nature likely makes him more of a security concern than Obama or even George W. Bush ever were. As previously mentioned, President Trump has a bigger family to protect than previous presidents. Unlike the previous several presidents who merely had 1 or 2 young children plus a spouse, Trump's security protects himself, his wife, their 5 children, 4 of whom are grown, his children's 3 spouses, and his 8 grandchildren. That's 18 people in all, which on its own would equal quite a bit more security money than a smaller brood. However, it doesn't stop there. Trump doesn't need just protection for his extended family, he needs it for his extended estates. Unlike most presidents who live in the White House and that's it, Trump splits his time between at least 3 different homes. In addition to the White House, he racks up a bill of roughly $28 million per year to protect Trump Tower in New York City. That cost isn't just due to the massive security surrounding the building, but also because for a time, Melania and Barron Trump would regularly fly to Trump Tower, usually via private jet. Each flight cost taxpayers tens of thousands of dollars. Then there's the infamous Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida, where the president regularly spends weekends. The first 7 weekends of the Trump presidency resulted in a bill of roughly $11 million between security and the cost of flying Air Force One back and forth. What's more, for a while, Melania would jet from New York to Palm Beach every weekend at a total cost of around $1.5 million. It's unusual for a presidential hopeful to have security in any form unless they're still in the race 120 days prior to the election, at which point they're afforded Secret Service protection. Trump didn't feel the need to wait. Being a public figure for decades before his presidential run, he had long before established his own private security force. He still asked for and received Secret Service protection a whole year before winning the presidency. So right out of the gate, protecting Trump cost more than the average candidate. Having Secret Service by his side didn't stop Trump from retaining his own force on top of what Washington provided him, meaning that for over a year at least, Trump had security in both the public and private sector, and those private sectors didn't come cheap. According to Trump's campaign committee, Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated spent over $260,000 on various private security firms between October 20th and November 28th. Of that amount, almost $165,000 went to a firm called Xmark, and over half that came from November 14th to the 23rd. A reminder that Trump had Secret Service and all its attached costs fully and completely watching his back for over a year by this point. There doesn't seem to be much word on whether or not Trump has retained private security since taking office. Even if he hasn't, the bill to keep him and his family safe remains as expensive as ever. Security is expensive enough, but what about mere travel costs? As it turns out, President Trump's travel expenses alone are enough to break the federal bank. As the right-leaning think tank Judicial Watch reported in January 2018, the first year of Trump's presidency saw a travel bill of over $13 million. More to the point, Trump's travel cost $13,533,937.28 for just a single year. This included Trump's frequent golf excursions, such as his trips to his own Bedminster Golf Club. A single trip there cost taxpayers $15,994 per hour. The vast majority of these expenses came in the first 6 months, as Judicial Watch reports that between June of 2017 and January 2018, Trump's travel costs were $3,199,188.30. No word just yet on what his Year 2 travel costs were, but it's highly likely figures will remain roughly similar. There's always going to be a debate on President Trump's security costs here in the United States, but elsewhere like in Great Britain, it's less debate and more flat-on outrage. In July 2018, Trump arrived in Britain for a visit that was just as much about pleasure as it was for business. Whatever the reason, however, the majority of Brits were displeased by the visit, to say the least, especially once they learned how much it was going to cost them. Due to all the security and policing necessary to guard a president as controversial as Trump, the UK was looking at a bill of over £5 million, or almost $6.5 million. And since the president included leisure in his trip, including a round of golf at the Scotland course that he himself owns, many Brits saw it as their tax money being wasted on guarding a leader who isn't theirs while he plays golf. As you might have expected, such anger invited mass protests, which in turn forced a police presence that the country hadn't seen since the riots of 2011. Luckily, nothing violent happened in 2018. Let's hope all future visits by Trump and other prominent figures are the same way. Whether you support it or not, the fact remains that there is an ongoing large-scale investigation by former FBI Director Robert Mueller into various possible violations of the law by President Trump and his associates. It's an expensive investigation for sure, but it appears the subject of it cost the taxpayers far more than the actual investigation. In June 2018, the Washington Post reported that Donald Trump has spent tons of money in both flight costs and security simply going to Mar-a-Lago for weekend getaways. If you go by Judicial Watch's estimate that each trip costs roughly $1 million for Air Force One travel and Secret Service protection, and that between February of 2017 and April 2018, Trump had visited Mar-a-Lago 17 times. That means $17 million in costs for just one of the president's regular activities. In contrast, according to a March 2018 Associated Press report, the Mueller investigation had cost taxpayers around $17 million. Already the two costs are roughly equal, but you have to consider that Mar-a-Lago trips come embedded with many extra costs, such as airlifting limousines and other equipment, as well as extra military protection outside of the Secret Service. Once you consider those costs, Trump's total Mar-a-Lago bill is almost certainly far greater than Mueller's investigation bill. The total amount is officially unknown, but the website Cheat Sheet estimates these trips cost as much as $40 million. That's on top of how much tax money has gone to Mar-a-Lago trips since March 2018. Plus, once you add in everything else Trump-related that requires travel and security, Mueller's investigation gets positively dwarfed by how much the president costs. Of course, only time will tell whether or not Mueller's investigation yields any consequential results, or if it winds up being, to use a popular political term as of late, a nothing burger. One thing's for sure, however, it still won't cost nearly as much as making sure the president and his family are safe. Like many politicians, Donald Trump enjoys golf. That said, it seems that his golfing trips aren't just more frequent than others, but they're far more expensive. In April 2018, the website Cheat Sheet released a blow-by-blow breakdown of just how much President Trump's golfing excursions have cost taxpayers since he took office. Overall, in just about 15 months, these trips cost almost $56 million. That includes $27 million in Mar-a-Lago flights, plus $13 million in security there, $9 million for flights to his club in Bedminster, New Jersey, and several $million in security from local law enforcement, on top of his usual Secret Service protection. Speaking of the Secret Service, when the president is golfing, they need to keep up, meaning they need their own golf carts. That's another $100,000 or so right there. What's more, according to Cheat Sheet, rarely does the president use these golf trips to conduct official business. He doesn't meet with too many politicians, largely preferring to play with athletes or business folks instead. Should President Trump get re-elected and keep this pace up, by 2024 his golf trips would cost an estimated $400 million. By contrast, as reported by Judicial Watch, President Obama's family excursions and golf trips cost taxpayers $97 million over 8 years. All opinions aside, there's a marked difference between these two figures. Just because Donald Trump relocated to Washington, D.C. for work doesn't mean he abandoned his beloved Trump Tower in New York City. On the contrary, his home there is as relevant as ever, and keeping it safe and secure is perhaps unsurprisingly quite expensive. According to a December 2017 Bloomberg breakdown, it costs roughly $149,000 a day for the NYPD and Trump Tower staff to protect Trump Tower. However, that's only when the president isn't there. When he is, federal security gets involved, and daily costs balloon to about $308,000. All in all, it's estimated that security costs for Trump Tower now total around $58 million per year, a figure that isn't likely to change much even after the tower's namesake leaves office. After all, once a president and prominent political figure, always a president and prominent political figure. President Trump isn't the only member of his family to incur sizable security costs. When his children travel for business, they need protection too, and that does not come cheap. Trump's two adult sons, Eric and Donald Jr., have taken several business trips since Trump Sr. took office. For just 5 of those trips, Ireland, Scotland, Canada, Dubai, and the Dominican, security and travel cost around $1.35 million. In February 2017 alone, their trips to Dubai and the Dominican ran up a $250,000 bill. What's more, there's concern among some that those trips weren't related to presidential business at all, but rather concerned Trump's private sector ventures that might amount to a conflict of interest. The Dubai trip centered around the opening of a new Trump golf course, while their Dominican trip concerned the family's efforts to open a Trump-branded resort down there. On his own, Donald Jr. has also racked up a sizable security bill. In November 2018, official documents revealed that his February trip to India, meant to sell the nation on Trump-branded luxury condos, cost taxpayers nearly $100,000 in security and travel. The overall bill for keeping President Trump and his family safe and secure also extends to his children's leisure time, whether voters and taxpayers agree with it or not. In March 2017, the president's 3 adult children, Eric, Don Jr., and Ivanka, took a trip to Aspen, Colorado for a spring break getaway. There was no business conducted, as this was merely a fun ski trip for the president's children and grandchildren. However, it was still the president's family, so they required as much protection as any other time. Over 100 Secret Service agents came along for the weekend trip, and that plus other travel-related costs resulted in a reported bill of over $223,000.